Hello and welcome. In today's video, I'm going to be taking a look at the watch inside of this pelican styled case from Luminox. So let's go ahead and open this up. Here we have the Luminox Original Navy Seal model, and this particular version is in the Blackout stealth color variation. So basically all black, just some white on the hands and our markers, which are the Tritium tubes, which we'll be talking more about since that's one of the key things about this watch and this brand, their use of Tritium technology for illumination on the watch face. Their name, Luminox, gets at that. So this is basically one of their oldest models, and we're going to do an exam of it, talk a little bit about its origins. We'll take some measurements, have a look at the front and back, and just kind of dive into it. It is a dive style watch with the rotating bezel. It is made from their Carbonox material, which is a carbon-based material on a resin strap. And although this is completely blacked out, designed for legibility with the tritium on there. So before we get into the details of that watch, we can do a wrist check. I am wearing my Casio MRW200H. This is an inexpensive Casio watch. It is dive styled, the rotating bezel, high legibility, resin strap. The dial is just friction resistance. It's not like a unidirectional bezel like most dive watches, and that's reflective of the price point. Is it coincidence that I'm wearing this for this watch exam? Well, we will see. The general vibe of Luminox, and particularly when putting that Navy Seal association to it, is of course that these are tough, durable tool watches designed to live up to challenging conditions. So very functional and meant to be durable. That intention is announced with this case that they come in. Is it gimmicky? Maybe. I don't think so, because it's kind of nice to have this hard plastic case for a watch. But kind of speaks to their purpose. Luminox, Swiss made, company founded in America. Okay, so let's take a look at this watch in closer detail. So As I mentioned, this is the blacked out model. So we have a purely black bezel, black face, and the numbers are in gray. There is a prominent Luminox shield brand, the 12 o'clock on the face. There are white bars above each of the hour numerals, and these are tritium tubes which will glow in the dark. And as I said, we'll talk more about that later. Those are reflected in the handset. Very simple, straightforward handset with those white markings, again the tritium tubes, to illuminate the hour and the minute hand. And then you see a small white tube there on the second hand. Very functional, no prominent design flourishes. The hands, hour and minute hand, like a pencil hand, but then with a very sharply shaped point, narrows there for precise indication at the tip. There is a date window at the 3 o'clock, replacing the numeral 3. And then you'll note, in addition to the 1 through 12 numerals that are the most prominent on the dial face, there are smaller numerals inside of those which mark out 24-hour time increments. So, as befitting a military watch, you can read a 24-hour equivalent as well as the 12-hour equivalent. The chapter ring has those white tubes of tritium marking each of the hours. As well as small second marks in between those. The bezel has an insert that basically has scooped out sections where each of the numbers are, and in those scooped out areas are numbers marking off 5-minute increments: 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, and those are carved out or indented, if you will, into the bezel, so only visible due to the physical indentation, no additional ink marking those. Prominently, there is this single tritium tube marking the 12 o'clock position, top of the dial and the bezel, so you can easily see the alignment even in the dark. The case is that Carbonox material, molded with kind of a prominent shape here on the side, matching that of the crown. And as I mentioned, it's on this resin strap. Take a look here. Just a very simple buckle. Which, you can see has a gray sheen to it on the black resin strap. Luminox branding again here on that strap. So a very utilitarian, numbers not as visible under most conditions being blacked out compared to some of the other offerings. But with the white markers and the white hands, pretty easy to read. And then of course in the dark, those are going to glow persistently. And currently somewhat obscured by the minute hand. It states Swiss quartz on the dial, and then 200 meters for the 200 meters of water resistance that this watch is designed for. It is not a screw down crown, perhaps somewhat surprising for a watch with this kind of rating. Let's move those hands out of the way here. So there we can see the markings for Swiss quartz and that 200 meters of water resistance. So as indicated, Swiss quartz, this uses the Ronda 515 movement 515, a solid quartz movement. Does require battery change, but the simplicity probably is a major factor here for the adoption of quartz rather than a more complicated automatic movement in a hard duty watch. So on that topic, this is the original Navy Seal watch. That's definitely something Luminox leans hard into in their marketing. Now, I don't think Luminox is dishonest or doing anything shady, but companies using Navy Seal in their marketing are definitely worth some skepticism, because you often find out the association is murky or later turns out to be very minor compared to maybe how it was billed. I think Luminox's connection is pretty clear and documented. The company was founded in 1989. They did have a contract with the Seals for this style of watch in 1992. It was in the 90s that Navy Seals as a marketing tool kind of really came to prominence. It has to be because of that action classic film Navy Seals, starring Charlie Sheen and Michael Biehn. And then in the 2000s with Afghanistan and Iraq, where special forces troops played a prominent role, I saw even more of that. But the challenge is there's a pretty broad spectrum of affiliation with the Navy SEALs, from equipment that was requisitioned by the military, officially contracted for, versus something that a SEAL may use on their own as personal gear. There's the larger Navy requisition apparatus, then SEALs have some more specialized equipment they obtain, and then compared to other units, as I understand it, some more latitude to use personal gear on their operations. So, something that is purchased by the military versus something that's used by 3 SEALs may be a very different thing. Now you could look at it the other way, that if 3 SEALs personally choose to carry a piece of gear, they must believe in it and thus see value in it. It's just the kind of thing where marketing hype gets involved, and some companies use the secrecy of the SEALs to kind of obscure their connection. Again, no shade at Luminox. This is just kind of in general. And really, in general, anything with a lot of marketing hype, you need to look at somewhat skeptically and evaluate based on your personal needs and wants. Marketing hype can be fun. The moon swatch. Lots of people are angry and say, oh, it's just a piece of plastic, but it's fun. The problem with that marketing hype is you spend more money than the specific product that you're getting, because you're paying for that marketing interest. So in anything, evaluate based on your own needs. It's great to get data from other humans, especially those with proven expertise, but their situation may be very different from yours. Even, budget, having budget being no object versus having a very tight budget, you're under a completely different set of constraints. It's not just watches, video cards. I have a video card in one of my computers that is much maligned and ripped on the internet, and it has given me years of faithful service, rendering videos and playing games to a perfectly satisfactory level of quality. Is everything maxed out? No, but that's not where I need it. So regardless of any marketing or how they've named the watch, there's certainly no doubt that many people have chosen Luminox for hard-duty use, in the military and civilian sectors. So it's certainly a capable watch, regardless of branding. Just, again, judge things on their merits as applies to what you're looking for. Which brings us to the question of pricing. We might as well dive in here and we'll take a look at the rest of the watch. I got mine for what I felt was a very good deal on a pretty steep discount and felt appropriate for the watch. The listed retail on these is something like $800. It seems kind of wild to me. You also see them on sale a lot. There's a very wide range of prices you might see for these, which is kind of unusual. Valuation tends to get established pretty effectively. I don't really want to speculate on what's going on there because I don't really have good information on it, but I will say the retail price on this feels quite high to me. This is a good, solid watch, but in terms of what you get, kind of the standard retail price seems pretty high. But on sale, maybe a very, very good value if you're looking for kind of sturdy, modern dive watch. So if you're interested in the watch, I would suggest you shop around a bit and keep your eye out on pricing, just to make sure you kind of know what you're getting. So the founder of Luminox has left the company and started a new one, also making watches. But I was listening to an interview he did on Two Broke Watch Snobs, the podcast, which is, as it sounds, a podcast for watch fans who are not filthy rich. But he said that the company got a big boost, from the Seal contract, but also from the Sharper Image, that chain of kind of tech-oriented stores you see in malls. They had a mail order catalog. 90s were big on mail order catalogs. And I wanted to find an image of Luminox from one of those catalogs, and with the way the internet is these days, everything is usually on there, but I struggled to find something which surprised me a little bit, although Google is changing search to sell their AI business. But even so, the only thing I found was on eBay, someone selling one of those print ads. So kind of hard to link to, but I will read the copy for you. Own the watch without enlisting. Join the Navy SEALs and dive from helicopters into raging oceans. Or own the watch that's built to survive such punishment. Made in Switzerland to U.S. military specs, self-powered tracer light sources, shock-resistant polymer case, water-resistant to depths of 660 feet. For a deep-sea dive or a weekend at the lake, you'll find timepieces for every adventure at the Sharper Image. Luminox Navy SEALs watch, $185 American dollars. Alright, so let's dive back into looking at this and do some measurements as well. So let's flip this over. So interestingly, on the resin strap, it is marked with the lug dimensions. I have been referring to this as a resin strap, which is inaccurate, as indicates on the back, genuine rubber. Most prominent when looking at the back is the Navy SEAL logo, reflecting that official connection. See the stealth blackout aesthetic continues on the back here. The case back is screwed down with these 4 screws. It's marked Series 3000 V3, and the reference number for this is X3.CZ01.BO for Blackout. We see Luminox and Swiss May below the Seal logo. It is very difficult to read below the Luminox Swiss made logo. There's an M and then a very tiny set of letters, which I'm actually using a magnifying glass to look at. And I'm going to flip this over because I think they're upside down. 1GBQH3LX. I'm guessing with the H3 that is a reference to the tritium in the watch. Tritium, of course, a radioactive isotope. More on that in just a moment. So beyond that section, around the case back here, around the case back, see the 200 meters water resistant Carbonox case, their proprietary carbon material case. And then also inscribed are the words mineral crystal, referring to the crystal on the front of the watch. Alright, so that is what is engraved on the back here. So one thing I will say about this watch, it has a very positive click to the bezel. It's a ratcheting bezel. You can hear that now. So basically 60 clicks, very solid, no funny in between points, very nice bezel rotation. Alright, I have these calipers. Let's take a look at some of the dimensions of the watch. So let's take a look at the bezel to start with. And this is what's interesting. Get 39 for the bezel. If we do the case, get 43. 42.74. So it's listed as a 43 millimeter, and I think of that as being quite large. But the bezel diameter is only 39 millimeters. If we go across the crown portion, this wide point with the crown guards and kind of symmetrical protrusion on the other side, a little more than 45. If we don't get the crown, just get the case, 44.45. So around 43 for the case. Let's grab thickness. I get right at 12.03. And the watch is listed as 12 millimeters thick, so that is right on target. Do you see? And if we take a look at those lugs, 21.5 are marked as 21. And let's go for a lug to lug distance here. Grab on the back. 45.56 millimeters lug to lug. So the dimensions surprised me quite a bit when I got the watch in person on a couple of accounts. So one, often think of the published width. It's kind of more the bezel width. Often that and the case are pretty synonymous or equivalent. And in this case, the watch that with the published 43 millimeter number was always portrayed as kind of durable, chunky watch. Its size is actually quite a bit smaller than I expected. I was actually quite surprised when I opened it for the first time. The other thing that surprised me is how light this watch is. It is extremely light thanks to that carbonox material. Again, you think big and chunky, you think maybe it'll be heavy. Definitely not the case. So that is the intent. Nice, light, and strong watch. But I was just in my mind got this chunkier, heavier vibe. So it's quite wearable and small. If anything, the strap is large enough on its own versus the weight of the watch to kind of have a lot of impact on how it wears. But this is why I wore the Casio, because I was very surprised when I opened this to find that it feels very similar. Now, of course, the Luminox, it has the Tritium, has the carbonox material. It's very durable. This is plastic. Like I said, it just has the friction bezel. But it is a very light watch on resin versus the rubber of fairly similar dimensions. So I recognize there's quite a difference between a $25 watch and a watch that lists for like 800, 700 something. But in terms of like day to day and how they feel, I was surprised at how similar. You can definitely tell there's more quality here in the case material, and of course that fantastic ratcheting dial compared to the Casio, but very interesting and definitely not what I was expecting. You can also see the Luminox has a much thicker strap compared to the Casio. What I was expecting in my mind was something more like this G-Shock that I have, which is a big, thick, bulky watch, that integrated resin strap. And this was my mental image for what the Luminox was going to be like. Instead, it got something quite light and smaller than expected. So if we look at the G-Shock here, and with that integrated strap, it won't go flat. So let me adjust our focus here. So yeah, this is a deep set dial with a variety of applied markers, multiple sub-dials, highly functional watch with lots of different functions, analog and digital, of course, quartz. But if we go, if I can get in here, just the bezel, get 45. If we included the full diameter of the case, 53. And this is also pretty thick without getting the protective case pieces. 14.4. So a much bigger, heavier, bulkier watch compared to the Luminox. And again, this was just my perception. Probably could have established that better. Didn't really look at a lot of reviews, just kind of was aware of it. So much more in line with the lighter Casio. This is, of course, specific G-Shock models can be hard to come by. There's so many different ones, but it was around 300. I think maybe I got it a little less. Very good value, incredibly durable. Both these are meant to survive hard use, quality timepieces that are going to stand up to the elements, impacts, and things like that. But yeah, those seem like two good comparison watches. So that should give you some sense of the scale of this watch. Lighter and smaller than I expected, but kind of in a good way. When I bought that G-Shock, I thought maybe it was going to be too big just for me. I don't mind it, but it's definitely like I'm wearing this big watch. This definitely very easy to wear. It just works great. But the last kind of key piece here, and what would really set this watch apart compared to its competitors and compared to competitors across many ranges, is the Tritium illumination. So this is different than the lume in other watches. They used to use radioactive paint in the early days of adding visibility to watch dials. The problem was that it was irradiating the wearer, so basically discontinued that in favor of the lume called Luminova. It was invented maybe as far back as World War II and kind of became more of a trade product in the 60s, if I have that right. And basically it was a substance, they're called phosphors, that when exposed to light will then emit light in turn. And there are two different kinds. One are fluorescent lights, and the other are phosphorescents. Fluorescents only emit light when they're actively being hit by radiation, by a light source. And as soon as you take away that source, then they stop emitting light. So like the fluorescent lights, that we use everywhere. When you flip off the switch, they stop giving off light. Phosphorescents continue to emit light after you take away the source of radiation. So they have a time delay to how they emit light after they've been exposed. And so if you're familiar with watch lume, you know that in order for it to shine, it has to be exposed to light. Best would be sunlight. And after being exposed to that light, it will continue to emit that illumination. This was also used in like old-fashioned radar screens where they needed the blip on the radar to stay visible as the beam made its circle. So use phosphorescent to keep that illumination going there for a minute. So that's what watch lume uses. And so it gets hit with light and then it will emit light. But, over time it will fade. After it's been exposed to sunlight, it'll be very bright. And then later in the night, it may go away completely. And that's where Tritium comes in. Because Tritium is a radioactive isotope of hydrogen. And so hydrogen on its own has a single proton in its nucleus. Deuterium is an isotope of hydrogen that has a single neutron in addition to that proton, and it's not really radioactive like tritium is, which has 2 neutrons. So an atomic weight of 3, having a proton and 2 neutrons in there, and it decays, it emits those neutrons, and it is radioactive, so it becomes a source of radioactivity for the phosphors in the watch. So instead of needing a light source to charge them up, if you will, the tritium is perpetually that source. So what this means is this watch is going to emit light from its tritium tubes without needing to be exposed to sunlight. It's basically always active. So you're going to have that illumination even if you haven't been able to expose it to light. So obviously that has some value. You're always going to have that illumination working for you. So as I said, they had discontinued the use of radioactive paint, but they found you could put the tritium in these little glass tubes that would contain it. It wasn't going to be affecting you, but it could be the source for emitting radiation and triggering those phosphors that'll give off that light. So it's pretty cool. People wonder about, isn't the radioactivity bad for you? And the companies make claims like, oh, you could eat all the tubes and it wouldn't really do you any harm, or be less than a commercial airplane flight, or stuff like that. The simple answer is it's not particularly harmful from a radiation perspective, even if ingested. I tried to look this up to kind of see, how significant the dosage would be, and I didn't get a precise answer, but there was some information about the health effects. Tritium has a half-life of 12.32 years, but I guess the half-life in the human body is relatively short. So they say it doesn't bioaccumulate, or it doesn't build up in your body, continually dosing you with radiation. So relatively low impact to your health. And if not ingested, it's not really going to penetrate the skin. So it is true, the radiation involved with the tritium in the tubes, pretty negligible in terms of health impacts. Alright, but that tritium illumination is one of the key differentiators in the Luminox product line. Of course, they're not the only company doing that, although they may have been one of the first to really do it commercially in watches. Most companies just using some form of the Luminova, which requires the charge from light to be functional. And let's take a look at that. So there you can see the glow of the tritium. Technically the tritium activating phosphors, which give off the light. Alright, so that is the Luminox Original Navy Seal watch, here in reference X3.CZ01.BO. The Blackout model dive watch. A sturdy carbon dive watch with tritium illumination. I hope you've enjoyed taking a look at this watch with me. I hope to see you next time. Maybe we'll do some dive watches, or maybe we'll change tack and take a look at a dressy watch. We'll see, but stay tuned, and I hope you have a wonderful night.